As the only lady here, ladies always are first. So, can you help us with your thoughts on what is the right time a family business should start talking about or thinking about planning for succession? What would be the best time to start thinking about it?
First of all, thank you so much for including me as part of this very distinguished panel. I am most honored to be here. And thank you again for asking me to speak first. I would have loved to hear all the very august thoughts of our distinguished panel, but I'll go first then. So I think, of course, succession planning is very important, but it's also, it's a name that has come into vogue now for the last few years. Decade or so. Succession planning has always been happening in all businesses. That's how family businesses have survived and thrived over so many years. It's just a business school term now that's come from the West. India has been very good at it and doing it. When do we think that families should start? I think in a way families are always doing it unconsciously. What is a family? It's a culture that everyone follows. My father went to Harvard Business School, so I grew up listening to Harvard Business School quote professors being quoted. And as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So no matter what strategy you may have implemented in your company or even in your family, if we don't all follow the same culture, we don't end up staying together as we do in a family, nor do businesses tend to survive for as long. So I think unconsciously there is always some culture and sort of values that are being passed down. I think it's very important for the next generation like me to be working in the business for at least 5 years before we understand what the business is truly about, and then we can sort of start having that conversation with our older generation. I think before that, when I first started working in the business, it takes a while. You start in the trenches, you're still figuring everything out, everyone has different agendas, everyone's trying to sort of assess you, you're trying to assess everyone, you're trying to figure out where the power structures are. So yes, I think a few years before we start having that conversation.
Excellent. That's the segue to the next question. Maybe I'll start with Monika this time. When it comes to entry into family businesses of future generations of the family, how would you look at that? What should be the timing? What should be the criteria? Whether it is age, qualification, experience, gender, whether it is the kind of family values that are imbibed in that individual, what would you look at for the right entry into a family business of the next gen? And how do you view it from your perspective?
I think I mentioned like she grew up in a family where she had alumni from HBS. I grew up in a family where I was the son of an alumni of IIM Ahmedabad. So the conversations were pretty similar. Exposures to professors, case studies, long conversations about how IIM was the best and is the best. And so that's something that gets ingrained very early growing up. And I think, really there is no real right time. I think earlier the better. I've always felt that, what's most lacking when it comes to these kind of discussions is the fact that a discussion is wanting. People shy away from a discussion. And I think sooner there is a clarity on rules of the game. There is that expectation setting early on, even with children growing up in a family business, then it's pretty clear in terms of what is set out for them and what they need to do and what is expected from them. I'm not even coming to division of family wealth or roles and responsibilities, but just the very fact that if there is a founder of the business or a senior member of the family running the business, expects that the next generation has certain, say, qualifications, skill sets, have that conversation. That look, for you to be in the business, this is what is expected of you. And I think that helps go a long way in terms of the clarity on the role.
Something like that, a role like that to the next gen.
Business requires efficiency. So whether it is your son, next generation or a professional, business doesn't know who is running it. So it is imperative that to be successful, to give rein to the other person, they have to be capable. Unfortunately, there is a limitation that whether they are capable or not, you can defer or delay, but ultimately they will get. That is one of the reasons what you were mentioning, that third generation doesn't see the prosperity of business. So it is about how to remain first generation business throughout. That you are continuously an entrepreneur, not an industrialist or businessman. If you remain a
entrepreneurial spark, so to say, is surviving and passed on to the future generations. And how do you make sure that you allow them that room or space to make those mistakes, fall, fail, learn, pick themselves up and ensure that the growth happens. Of course, calculated risk may be taken. So how do you make sure that because once the next generation is used to a certain standard, is used to a certain safety net, one still has to ensure that entrepreneurial spark, that risk-taking ability is not forsaken. How do you ensure that? Maybe your experience on that may be very, very helpful.
Well, what you have asked is a very difficult question because there is really no formula that I can think of where you can really impart the entrepreneurial skill or the entrepreneurial quest to anybody, even alone the next generation. What I can say is I have two experiences. One experience is when my father and uncle kind of groomed me, and one experience is what I am presently going through is the grooming of my kids who have just entered business. Childhood memories of my father and uncle were not so much on the preschool and education because they hadn't gone abroad and they just graduated from Xavier's. So I don't think they focused very much on that. But what I saw that they worked very, very hard, and I saw them at work all the time. In fact, I don't think there was any downtime to the best of my knowledge. My childhood memories were filled with just everything revolving around work, including on the dining table. So that's one memory I have. The second memory I have is the importance they gave to integrity. And the fact that they would say ki jawan de diya to baat ho gayi. And it was not about necessarily something written on a piece of paper. I think those times people took the word much more seriously perhaps than perhaps they do today. But that was two very, very distinct features of my childhood conversations. It so happened that I did enter some of the family businesses, but as luck would have it, at some stage in life they got divested. So I have also had the privilege of being a startup entrepreneur, of course with blessing, support and financial support of the family, but at least in terms of all the businesses that I look after presently were not inherited by me from family. Of course, I was inherited the legacy, inherited the values, the name, and the resources, but not the business. So it has been a kind of a khatta meetha journey, which has been very, very rewarding, I would say, emotionally, but it has also been challenging. Coming to the next generation, well, I don't know if I'm able to spark that same enthusiasm. I do feel a sense of promise in my children, but I'm like anyone else, an indulgent, doting father. So I'm sure I have my share of biases there. But let's see, time will tell. They just entered the work field less than a year ago, so I think we'll have to give them a few years before I can say that I have been able to. And if I am able to do that, then maybe I'll have a story to tell you as to how to transfer the spark.
Sure, sir. I'm sure that will happen. We heard Devina speaking, of course. How would you envisage at different stages of a new entrant into the family business, from the family, the role evolving? What kind of role would you feel would be ideal? Start from the bottom, start from the middle, start from something like a trainee. how would you envisage that role in terms of responsibilities being given, rights being offered, and so on? And how do you see it evolving over a period of time?
See, fundamentally it starts from childhood, where you must inculcate a sense of achievement. Okay, that I've got to achieve. So whatever they do, they should do well and they should try to excel in it.
Excellence.
Okay, excellence. Okay, pursuit of excellence. Okay. Now, as you go forward, then you come into a situation where people have to become familiar with the business and also acquire the ability to deal with people. And not have an air of superiority, but get into a business with a certain sense of humility. Now, there are various ways of achieving this. I've seen in many families, they insist that the children go out and work in the outside world for a few years before they join, so that they get an idea of what it feels like to be in a situation where you are not the owner per se, or the owner's son or daughter or whatever. Okay? So then they have to have, so most important is, to my mind, is a sense of humility. They must be humble and they must learn. I remember once I was with somebody who is at the peak of his sort of business. Okay? He was doing very well, and he said that I inherited this business, and when I inherited it, I suddenly found that we didn't have money to pay the salaries for next month. We had all this, this whole setup here, and so it was a very difficult time. And I also realized that I had inherited it, but I was not that smart. So he said the only smart thing I did was to surround myself with smart people. Okay. So with that, he said, I have come up, okay, and I have learnt as I've gone along. So the important thing is, surround yourself with smart people, learn from them. Don't go out there thinking that you know everything and you can teach them. Okay. So this is another attribute, or this is another quality which somebody must have when they are getting into a business, okay, in order to go forward.
A brilliant point, actually. So Chatterjee Saab, let me come to you. Always have heard that getting the best professionals and professionalizing a family business is never easy. And getting that piece right is sometimes critical to ensure differential growth of the family business, because that's the talent that you need to make it to grow. How do you view professionalization? How best do you think family businesses can embark on this path of professionalizing family businesses in right earnings?
Thank you, and I'm very glad to listen to all the speakers before me who run and manage their family businesses so well, and it's a great subject. About professionalization, I have my own experience, where in some cases a business needs to be professionalized, otherwise it suffers. And it, under the family's management, as the business grows, I think getting professionals involved, but also making sure that they see something more than their salary, so that they stick around and they feel like an owner. There is a time where the business has grown and it's impossible, or you don't have the talent to manage a business. You never know what the talent required for a business. You might be the right person of the business today, but the requirement of the business might change tomorrow. Be prepared. The way your family prepared may not be the right way in the future. But also, I've seen times where professionalization has happened too early. So for example, when it is almost like a startup environment, and you got a professionalized, like I got into industry, like in the furniture industry. It's not an industry which is very, it's large in India. I couldn't find Indian professional management. I got expat professional management. The business was too small for having an expat professional management. I was not able to retain the talent. So in some ways, what I've learned is you have to, within the family, take the risk and take the first steps yourself, and then make the business ready and in some ways large enough for professionals to take it. And at that time, how to incentivize, whether it's other members of your family or keeping professionals motivated. That is the getting it right is the challenge.
So, Mohanpati, let me come back to you. Typically, we see in family businesses, there might be different parts of the family. Some members might be very active in the business. Some members might have their own passions which they are pursuing. And how do you balance these two? And how do you ensure that those who are contributing to the growth of the business versus being sleeping partners, if I might say so, how do you balance the two, remunerate, reward, give that kind of motivation to those who are contributing to the growth, continued growth of the business?
Well, that's a difficult one, not very straightforward, but I'll take a shot at it. I think when you go to business school, there's the first thing that's taught is ownership is different from management. So I'll start from there. And I always believe that irrespective of the contribution of the family members, as long as it is pretty much agreed on how the economic interests of the business will be shared, I think it's not really relevant whether the member is active or passive, because that can be achieved through a board position. So the equity ownership is what should drive, the economic benefit, and let the one who is most capable, most skilled, shows that passion and shows that drive to grow the business, be an operating manager or not. That's how I would look at it.
Sure. Let's go to Jindal Saab, I think, who's present virtually. We are missing you in person, but really thankful that you have been able to join virtually. The way we have discussed it so far, professionalizing seems to be something that has to be done, but at the right time. Ensuring that ownership and control is adequately shared and there is respect for all. What is the role of segregating, say, economic interest of the business versus control and management? And how well do you think that can be managed by a family business in the best interest of the family business as well as in the best interest of the family itself, plus the long-term perspective of the family which is owning the business? So balancing economic interest versus control and management. And there are enough structures. We of course know that equity shares give both economic interest as well as control. But there are enough ways to structure things whereby economic interest is with one set, whereas control and management is with the other. And how do you view that and the importance of that in an evolving family?
Thank you for giving me this question. It's a pretty close to my heart, because this is something that my family has done very well. They have been able to segregate the economic interest with the management interest, and it has worked wonders for us. Because all brothers, even though there is economic interest in each other's businesses, there is complete and total management control on their own. So this ensures that we work together, we support each other, we're able to grow as a family. It is a conversation that is very important. I think communication between family members, between the second generation, third generation, is the most critical thing that has to be done. And if these things are taken into consideration, separating economic interest from management interest is a must. That is the only way we see all this infighting, we see all this transactional relationship that happens between families, that can come to a close. I hope I am audible and clear, because seems to be some disturbance.
Yes.
But
yeah, we can hear you clearly.
okay. So I think it is a very important step, but before anything is done, conversation is a must between all family members, and this is a step they can take forward. So the earlier it happens, the more clarity there is in these processes, that truly helps.
Excellent. So Langurji, once again, in terms of exit from a business, do you think there has to be an approach and a clarity as to when a person from the family exits from the business, or do you think that's something that completely should be at the discretion of each individual within the family?
In all the families, every generation splits. And when the splitting is taking place, at that time, many of the parts of the business you are exiting anyway, whether you want it or not. And then once you are having your own business, it really depends on the next generation. And there they have to take decision what is best for them. Exiting is still a taboo in India, but if the better management gets it, if you get a good value for it, it is good. But exiting for the sake of exiting has no value. This is about exiting.
Sure. So, Niyotyaji, your thoughts. So, if one were to look at any family business, should there be, especially in a large one, should there be some kind of rule based, like many companies have, X age, the person must step down from an executive position and so on and so forth. Is that something that you would endorse, or you think it's when the next generation is ready to lead, that's when one has to step down? So depending upon the facts and context of each case, rather than having a rigid rule-based exit strategy.
I think in family businesses it's difficult to have a rule, and I also don't think it's necessarily wise. Sometimes some family members are ticking at their best when they are 70 plus. That's when they have made all the mistakes, and they probably don't have any more scope of making mistakes. They've got all the wisdom, they've probably got still good health. Again, there could be people, my great-grandfather retired when he was 49. And that was several years ago. And and he lived to be 100, and he lived in good health. So I was quite amused when I was young that I used to ask him, I said, why did you retire so early? He said, no, I just thought I'd devote myself to meditation and really religious practice, etc. But that was his choice. He never did it out of compulsion. He never had a next generation pushing on. He didn't do it because he was not well. So I don't think there is really a finite answer to this. I think it should evolve. But yes, people should be conscious that at some point of time they shouldn't hang on because they just want to hang on, and if their health or their interest is waning, it's also not necessary that it will always necessarily go to the next generation. It should be seen that the organization that is built survives. That's key, because you have created wealth and that should not get destroyed. And maybe the next generation has the wherewithal to do it, and sometimes you have to let them own the asset, but perhaps give the management elsewhere.
Great. So, Swarup sir, coming back to you, if one were to look at family members, some of them might be really cut out for leading a family business. Some of them might be really cut out for decision making on family matters. How would you view this, and how would you transition a role which really fits the particular person's capability and skill set?
You see, now we are coming to human behavior, okay? And it is very difficult to predict or to manage human behavior for that matter. Okay? So, in a sense, water finds its own level, okay? And you will see certain things stand out, okay? As long as you have the greater good in mind, okay, all solutions will emerge. Okay? Certain people would step aside, in order to encourage the person who's most active and who's most promising. And certain people, I know of a family where there are two brothers, a prominent family of India. One is extremely competent as far as business is concerned, and I would say that I admire him immensely. And his brother says, I'm not cut out for this, and I will only pursue philanthropic activities. So you have all kinds of situations, you've got all kinds of solutions, okay? And I would say it's very difficult, and this is where it comes, the elders have a certain responsibility, okay, of guiding, of seeing, of selecting, of identifying skills, and then molding family opinion in the direction that is good for the family, okay? The other thing is that today what is happening is that you have a lot of businesses which are, let's say, public businesses, where the family owns a certain share, but not the entire business. There you have a larger responsibility as well, okay, to the shareholders at large, okay, and you are coming to a situation where business has become very complicated, and competence, and you need to be competent. So you need to be a wealth creator, and if you are not one, you shouldn't be in that place.
Correct, absolutely. Very, very well said. And when it comes to transition of wealth, Mr. Chatterjee, let me start with you. There are two different approaches which I have seen, apart from some families who hand over everything to the next gen and let them take the decision thereafter. There are some families who create structures which are, so to say, almost meant for future generations rather than only the next generation. Where would your view lie, and what do you think could be the benefits of one or the other? Handing over everything to the next gen, or keeping something which is essentially wealth for future generations? Especially I have seen this in first generation entrepreneurs who want to, or entrepreneurs who have really enhanced their business during their lifetime to a different level altogether, to want to think of one or the other, next gen or future generations generally.
So, firstly, I think it's important for a family to not define the business as wealth. Right? Sometimes there might be more liabilities than assets. You don't know. It is a responsibility that you have to grow up saying that this is something that I want to, if you want to be part of the business, in the management of the business, that you'll do whatever it takes to run it. For employees, for suppliers, for customers, for family members. And I think even before handing over shares of the company, at least the advantage that a family business has is you can predict the next management level from the time they are born. So you can inculcate responsibilities, the sense of taking care of, like when I was small, we used to have one landline telephone, which would sometimes ring. And if a tea estate, my family's in the tea business, if a tea estate were to call, I knew what to say, because my father might be out or something, so my father would say these things, get this information and say these things. So, just to know small actions of what it takes to just keep it going. And also, like Harsda said, I think seeing your grandparents and parents work extremely hard makes it less like you're getting a gift than a responsibility. I think once that is done, then you can decide whether you need a family constitution or whether it's between different generations, brothers and sisters and parents. I think the family of the business is also very important. Keeping the closeness of the family. And saying that I'm doing this, I might be the right person at this moment. But even like the point you were talking about exiting, I think as a son, I would like to see that my father is happy in the role that he has, as he has always maintained that I should. So it's if it means that being involved in businesses, he can certainly keep contributing. But if it also gives him, more joy out of it, that is very important. That's something that as children, and I hope that by seeing that, our future generations will also see. That is so that sense of coming back home. And one thing I'd like to add is a lot of discussions have in office there is certainly a sense of hierarchy between senior management, junior management. As I joined the business, I was at the junior level, but one thing is, especially in joint family, which is how I grew up, when we got back home, the same hierarchy didn't sustain. So the grandparents and the grandchildren and all of that, I think that gives a resilience and ability to take pressure, which any business will face. And that's especially true of our own culture, our Indian culture.
Sure. Coming back to the point that was being made earlier as well, we talk of really three dimensions when it comes to families and family businesses. One is, of course, the family business itself. Second is transition of the wealth across generations, which is different. Economic interests might be different from control management. And the third is perpetuating family values, whether it is of humility, as was very clearly brought out by Swaroop Saab, so important, or whether it is of integrity, as was brought out, and so on. So the point that we need to make is, how do you balance these, especially in the context of family businesses? How do you ensure that it's not just transition of wealth and succession to the family business, but also the values, the entrepreneurial drive, the hunger, the integrity, the humility is passed on to the next generation? So Bangur Saab, maybe I'll trouble you with that. What would be the way in order to achieve, because it's so important to ensure that the family values are passed through from one generation to the other?
Of course, it is very important, but as we all see, by the time third generation comes, the family values are highly diluted. From wealth generation, from nothing, from sheer hard work, to second stage is money earns money, and third stage is money is being spent on the hobbies. So the point is that these family values, you can try to pass, but then you have to be involved totally and fully with the right values. If you are shortchanging, the biggest thing is you are not defrauding anyone but your own family, because they then learn the wrong things. So integrity to self, to business, to government, that has to be maintained at the highest level. Then only it will go into the next generation. If they say, see easy money and high spending, then no amount of your lecturing will have the same effect which certain discipline can have. So to better have self-discipline, that is all important. You have to spend fully on their education. Once the education is complete, they can go anywhere they want, no seed money. You are now educated person, you do whatever you want. If you don't get any job, come and you can sit in my company at this salary. This has to be concept, not the ownership right that yes, I want this and C-class Mercedes from day one. That is not the value. If you give it, all values are destroyed.
Let's hear Devina's perspective also on this. How well this has been inculcated, and how do you think it started from the time you were a kid at the dining table, or how do you think this family value transition has translated in your?
I had a feeling you would ask me this question. So I can only speak from my own experience, and I think this is definitely something that has come from birth. I grew up in a joint family. We were about 10, 15 members living together. This dining table that you talk of, we had a very large dining table. All 3 meals used to be together with each and every member of the family. We had to show up on time. And I think my grandfather, grandmother sort of embodied the values that they wanted us to have. Right from honesty, simplicity, achievement, pursuit of excellence, pursuit of knowledge, humility. All of these, we saw them espouse that in their daily lives. I was telling someone recently, I was talking to one of our investment managers recently, and he was like, why don't you spend more money? And I said, on what will I spend more money? I spend on everything that I want to spend on. And I cannot tell you how much of this is because of the way I was raised and the way all of us were raised. And today I'm a third generation in my family business, and I work with not just my sister but my cousins and different parents, uncles, aunts, etc. And I think a lot of the harmony that we share today is because we grew up in a joint family, shared meals together, shared the sort of same spending patterns together. We saw the values that our parents were living, our grandparents were living, and I think there's no replacement for that. going back to the point that, you know, I don't think my grandfather ever retired. I don't think I saw him take a day off. He was always thinking, always working. I'm pretty sure my father will be the same way. Coming to your point of what is a good time to exit, I think it's very person dependent. I don't think I would want him to exit because he's such a resource, such a source, fountain of knowledge. I mean, there are so many our business is almost 75 years old now, and I don't even know half the things. I mean, he's forgotten more than I will ever know. So, so yes, I think it's something that the values that I saw my family live and passed down to me purely by showing, not by telling, is something that have stayed on.
Right. So let me go to the senior Mr. Chen. In most cases, ensuring family harmony, peace, bonding is so critical, even for the success of the family business. Any insights on how do you think sure, apart from, of course, passing on the right family values, which itself contributes to a large extent in ensuring?
I think our value systems are shaped by what we see, particularly whilst growing up. And if we see good family values, we imbibe those. And then we tend to practice those. And as we grow older, we realize that how important these values are. Okay? And like it was said, to my mind, it is by example that one picks it up. Nothing more than that.
Right, excellent. Mohan Kaji, very quickly to you. In many cases, we find different verticals that a business has, large family complexities. How do you view, ensuring that everyone has the right role? Should there be a first amongst equals, or should there be shared leadership, joint leadership? Or would you identify someone who is really the best from a family business standpoint for growth of the business? How do you balance the interests of the family, harmony, peace on the one hand, amity, bonding on the one hand, and ensuring the best from a business standpoint, growth standpoint on the other hand?
I think you saved the most complex ones for me for some reason.
Yeah, the president has to answer the most complex ones, right?
Well, I mean, as this entire session unfolds, there's no straight answer to any of that. I think as leaders, founders of businesses, family-run businesses, I think one of the role of the leader is also to be able to have the right person in the right slot. Right? So he is supposed to have that instinct, that gut, in terms of, in a very unbiased fashion, in terms of who amongst the family members are best suited for certain roles. I mean, I can say it as easy as that, but it's really hard because there are sensitivities, there are emotions involved, there are certain expectations which need to be managed. But I think, as Mr. Swaroop also alluded to, if you are true to the purpose, which is creation and sustenance of family wealth through generations, I think people will make way for who they think is the best for that particular role, and they ought to. And then it's the role of the senior leader or senior member of the family to ensure that he manages those sensitivities wisely.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much. I turn to Jindal ji. So
I would like to.
Sure. Please, absolutely. Anyone, please feel free.
No, well, this is just to be a little contrarian and to throw some food for thought, which might be interesting for all of us. I have green fingers. I potter around in my garden, and I recently set up a small vegetable garden, and I was, just looking after them, and I saw that with the same efforts that you did, some plants sprouted and gave a bountiful harvest of tomatoes, and some other didn't. But the effort that was put, or the attention that was given, was not very different. I mean, in terms of the sunlight, in terms of the manure, in terms of the water, or whatever else that you put. I would just like to say that we all can do what we can do. But there is a factor which is an X factor.
And you can call it karma, you can call it fate, you can call it divine grace. Something else also works. Otherwise, the father of the nation wouldn't have his eldest son, Harilal, to turn out the way he did. He was a brilliant father to his 3 other sons. I'm sure he would have imparted the similar kind of knowledge to all of them. But the first one, as we all know, turned out very differently. So I think we need to recognize that there is a limitation to no matter what we do, when something won't sprout the way we had wanted, and something will sprout even better than we expected.
Oh, sure, very excellent perspective indeed. So, Jindal Sahab, coming to you, we were talking of joint leadership versus single identified leader, sometimes in a large family and its businesses. And we've seen structures, one of course trust structures, family charters, constitutions and so on, but also sometimes businesses being verticalized and separate verticals being given charge of to each particular leader. But eventually, has there to be someone who leads the entire family business as a group, whether it is the senior most or the most capable or whatever it might be? The fact still remains that should there be some last stop to any decision making that really needs to be done by the family business as a whole, whether it comes to resource allocation, exiting, entering businesses, exiting businesses, and so on and so forth.
So again, there is no straight answer that I can give. It also totally depends on the size of the business, size of the group that is involved. But the main thing that is definitely required to be seen is what is the future that the second generation or third generation is interested in. But when it comes to taking a decision, I think only one leader is critical. So there should not be a democratic kind of approach. If there are different verticals, definitely the most capable one should be selected, but these conversations are required to be had before. It is made clear to the generation that you have to compete, and competition is very welcome. That is something that I can give my own example. That is what kept the fire in our belly. That you are not going to be given the company, you have to earn it, you have to prove yourself. This was made clear much before, much earlier. So there is no one straight answer, but I don't like a democratic approach when it comes to running a business. I think at the end there needs to be one final decision maker, but different family members can run verticals, see if they're interested. Because generally a lot of people, when they enter the business, then they realize finance is not their cup of tea, or sales and marketing is something that they're totally interested in, not as much as the operation side. So it is about figuring your way out, but at the end, a single leader is very important.
Right. So, Neotia ji, let me ask you this question. If there was a choice between continuity of the business, jointness of the family to be maintained, versus giving flexibility and freedom to different parts of the family to be able to take their decision whether to exit or not exit with the economic interest that each one has. How does one manage that conflict between, on the one hand, ensuring jointness and continuity amongst the family members in the family business versus giving them the flexibility and freedom to choose at every point of time?
Well, this comes to the root question that we are mixing up management with ownership. I think people should do what they are naturally inclined and interested to do, because if they are forced to do something, inevitably that business will suffer and they will be unhappy. So I don't think that's a good solution ultimately. Of course, children take time to figure out what they are interested in. They are often in some kind of imagination that something will work and something is interesting them at a particular stage of life, and I think we have to give that time for them to settle in. Having said that, we should build in some flexibility, and we can continue that they own a part of the business, but they may be actually involved in something else. Therefore, some way of part exit is necessary because you need to give them some resources if they want to be in business. If they want to be in a different field like in arts or something else or sports, then maybe they don't need so much of the resources. So that's the different aspect. I think it's a combination. It's very difficult to put a formula to it, but I think one has to be open-minded. Otherwise, you can stifle a lot of creativity of an individual who might just want to be doing something else.
Right. That of course throws open various other complexities as to how do the balance part of the family raise the resources. Maybe you go to a private equity, get some resources to give part exit to someone or an IPO, but that could impact the continuity, control of the family over the business, bringing in, outsiders and so on. So those are the kind of complexities.
So I think it's better to address this problem rather than to let it linger and then fester. Because if the person reluctantly is having no choice but to do something that he or she has really no interest in, it will in any case suffer greatly. So that would not be a good idea, I think.
Sure. I see Swarup Saab eager to add his comments on that, please.
You see, the thing is that at the end of the day, the business ultimately becomes an institution. I'm talking of a medium or a medium-sized business at the very least, or even a small medium business. It becomes an institution. And an institution by its very definition would have several stakeholders. And there are several and these several stakeholders are not necessarily the family itself. You have employees, you have suppliers, you have people at large, you have customers, you have all kinds of things.
Right.
So to that extent, you also have a social obligation. Right? And you've got to be sensitive to that. And therefore, you've got to do the best that is required for the business. And if it comes to selling it because you don't have the necessary competences, then so be it. You better be ready for that. Okay? You cannot let the business suffer. And you are in a very competitive environment. And if you neglect the business or you let it drift, it's going to decline. And so you'll end up destroying them. Okay? So you also got to consider that it's not only me and my family, but there are others as well.
Absolutely, very well said. So one has to keep business interest paramount in mind. Very, very true. In terms of ensuring that the family and its bonding also survives, there are some key rules, whether it is communication, transparency, fairness, trust. How do you ensure that some of those are? Do you think that it is best to have clarity on that through maybe a family charter or something, so that in future generations there is clarity that some of the things will be very clearly, transparently communicated by those who are running, controlling the business, to those who are probably economic interest owners but not really active decision makers? What would be the best way to ensure that there is a formalization of some of this process?
No. You have family charters. All these are enablers, okay, for you to achieve a certain purpose. Okay? You have family charters. You can have trusts in order to ensure that the control does not, get fragmented and so on and so forth. And you can have various rules in terms of what the sort of beneficiaries of those trusts are, how they'll get the benefits, and so on and so forth. All that is there. But at the end of it also comes down, if you had the ability to build up a business, you also should have the wisdom of basically seeing as to how it continues. Okay?
Very.
All right, that's one. Second is, I think when we talk of continuity, we get into the phase of preservation of wealth, okay, as opposed to creation of wealth. So the founders and so on and so forth, they are looking at wealth preservation, that they should continue. What we forget is that you also need to keep creating wealth. Okay? And when you get into a wealth preservation mode, your risk-taking ability reduces. Okay? It is that founder who was the creator and who said, well, I was zero, I became a hero. So what happens? So what if I become a zero again? Okay? But that's not the case when we are looking at preserving wealth. So risk-taking ability and preservation also have a linkage. Okay? And risk-taking ability is very important for wealth creation as well.
Excellent. Bangurji is keen to chip in, please.
Gradually, our discussions are changing from managing the family business to how to manage the business families.
So they are both so closely linked.
That
actually.
should not be the real thing. Because whatever we are talking is about the focus is the next generation or the individual. But the focus has to be business. Business has to be run by
Paramount.
most efficient people. When we say some people work, some doesn't work in the family, the working people automatically gets much more reward. Reward, the wealth maybe or the profits may be generated equally or divided equally. But the prestige, the recognition in the society, they are much bigger things. They will come only to those who are working. So the recognition and the reward is automatic. That's all I can say.
Understood. Great. Thank you so much. I think we have some time for a few questions. I'm sure with such an eminent panel here, you have a set of questions as well. So please, yeah.
To this August panel, one question. Your thoughts on splitting the owner and the manager. Till now we are talking more or less around the owner-manager. Thoughts on splitting owner and the manager.
Well, as I had said, I think in my comments, that ownership in the beginning of an entrepreneurial journey is usually together with management. But as it goes forward, it's not necessary that generation after generation will have the same interest and the same ability to run that business. So I would be much in favor of saying that we need to assess that. There are many examples where the next generation has actually taken the business forward.
Conversation to have. You just have to keep doing that till one reaches a point where there's a mutual understanding between the two. Because the older generation has the wisdom which the younger generation doesn't have. The younger generation does need the older generation, but the younger generation has got the energy, the sort of, the advantage of age which the older generation doesn't have, right? And to go out and do things. So it is a team that they have to sort of work in, but you have to have a dialogue. And I think in family businesses especially, there is no concept of 360 feedback, communication about agendas which are uncomfortable. So this is something that we do need to keep working on.
Excellent. Constant, open and transparent communication is key. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hello, myself Dr. Anandrup Sarangi from Maulana Abul Kalam University of Technology. So my question is, basic question is, what are the biggest challenges faced by business families in India?
Biggest challenges. What are the
Well, we know that our country has come a long way from where it was with license, permits, quotas, etc. But if you look at the Western world, ease of doing business, we are still not at the top. We are catching up in our infrastructure greatly, particularly in the last few years. We've really done extremely well. But we still have the cost of infrastructure, cost of transport to be high. So I think basically we need to improve these things, which I think is work in progress. The fact that we become the 5th largest economy, the fact that we are likely to be the 3rd largest in the next 2-3 years, and the fact that we are really growing very fast, all augurs well to a good future. So I'm saying that it's getting better, but we still have some distance to go.
I think we are running out of time. Maybe one last question we will take before we end it.
My questions to the panelists: how to resolve the uncle syndrome while transitioning in the family businesses? Uncle syndrome. Lot of time the younger generation coming, at the same time the older generation also there. Then the uncle syndrome comes into play. What I have seen it. How to resolve that?
This young girl has given you the answer. Have a good dialogue with your uncle.
Thank you so much.
But I will give an example, okay, from a real life experience.
Sir, what happens? Suppose the founders have 2-3 brothers. Everyone is involved in the business.
I'll give you an example of somebody I know, okay? Not that I'm giving you a solution. I'll give you an example of somebody I know who's very successfully handled this. He has built up a great business, a global business, okay? And he had his father, his chachas and cousins and so on and so forth. But he was the driver and he is the driver, okay? And he is a very driven person, very competent, and he's done a brilliant job of building up that business. But he was not the oldest, nor was he second oldest, he was probably third oldest. Everybody kind of stepped aside, he was so aggressive, he used to do it. So once I asked him, I said, how do you manage all these family dynamics? He said, it's very simple. Everybody knows that I run it, but I don't let them feel it. Okay. I give them the required respect. I put them forward. Anything formal has to be done. Anything in the company temple, any inauguration, I put the elders in front. I step back. So I don't sort of crave for this recognition. But everybody knows that it is I who have done.
Thank you. Sir.
Wow,
Thank you.
brilliant. On that note, I think I'm being told that we are short on time now. Thank you so much for such a interactive audience, and I must thank each of my panelists. Really, what an outstanding panel I have. It was a privilege to moderate this discussion. Thank you so much.
Hello. And it's my honor to give the vote of thanks to this fantastic panel. I think I've been attending ICC events for a long time, but I think this was one of the best panels we've had. So please give a very strong round of applause for everyone. I think the one question that at least stumped Rudra and Mehul and Abhyuday was uncle syndrome, because they're not old enough to be uncles yet, so they were still a bit stumped by that. But I think one of the great takeaways for me, I think there were some great life lessons, and I do hope this was recorded, because I think this would be one of the great, I would say, panels to be played to younger people, younger businesses, as they look at, next generation and moving on. Because one of the great lessons that I took from this and what they said is that wealth can come and go. Wealth is something you cannot predict what happens, how it happens. And if we are focused on wealth preservation, we are actually focused on the wrong question. I think we should be focused on value preservation. And I think if you see, we have certain families here which are multi-generational families. And I think and especially when I come to Kolkata, one thing that I always see is families that have had multi-generation businesses. And one of the great common denominators I see in all of them is that they have preserved the right family values over multiple generations, the right mix of humility, the right mix of respect, and of also the ability to let go sometimes, which is also not very easy. So I believe that if you have value preservation, wealth preservation always comes with it, and I think that's something that one can look at. On another note, we also see increasingly family businesses partnering with startups, putting their capital, and that's something that...
Again, even